Good afternoon. My name is Mark Schaefer. I'm chairman of the Jefferson County Historic Preservation Commission. We're currently undertaking a research project that revolves around the Louden Machinery Company of Fairfield. We're at the home of Tom and Dorothy Louden today at 905 East Adams. Am I right?
That's correct.
And we are outside with Tom in front of this rock, and it just looks like a rock, but it has a particular significance with the Louden Company. I think Mr. Louden can fill us in on that.
Well, perhaps as you recall, Mark, in about 1927, William Louden gave to Logan School quite a number of pieces of playground equipment, swings, a merry-go-round, slides, and so on and so forth. And at that time, this rock was placed at the site of that equipment with a plaque on it saying it was donated by William Louden as of that date and so on. I don't have the plaque. It's owned by Bruce Louden, who lives in Connecticut. But I didn't want the rock to get away from us, so my wife and I managed to get it down here and put it in this spot when Logan School was torn down and the site was abandoned.
And that was in the early 70s, 1972 or 3 or so?
I'm not sure what date it was, but someplace in that time.
Logan School stood where the Logan Apartments now stand, at the corner of 4th and Madison, I believe. Mm-hmm. It was a big old building built in the 1890s. It had a clock or a bell tower, and kind of a picturesque building. So there's a little remembrance of it.
Well, we wanted to have a remembrance of it because I have fond memories of the days when I played on that playground equipment.
Go. Now, is that merry-go-round at the country club? Is that from that collection?
No, that was given to the country club at about the same time.
Okay.
By the Louden Machinery Company.
Okay.
That and swings and teeter-totters and I don't remember what all, but playground equipment.
Sure. Well, I think we've seen enough of the rock. We'll go inside now and look at your Louden collection.
All right, fine.
Thank you. Okay, we see here a picture of William Louden. It's an illustration in an early catalog, I think from the 20s, maybe the late teens. And the picture you saw just before that was his original hay carrier that was patented in September of 1867. And Tom, I believe you have some background history of the Louden family that you need to share with us.
Well, Mark, I'd be happy to. The Louden family came over here and arrived in Jefferson County in 1842. They came over from Ireland. And Andrew Louden and his wife Jane homesteaded southeast of Fairfield, 4 or 5 miles. At that time they had just one child. He was born en route from Ireland. His name was William. William grew up on the farm and was not a very healthy child. In fact, they didn't expect him to live, but he did. And as he grew, he found himself unable to do farm work. And of course, that was their livelihood in those days. So William was an imaginative young man, and he was a born inventor. He conceived of an idea that would be a labor-saving device on the farm and would enable him to put hay in the mow, and that was the hay carrier. The original you just saw a picture of. This is the second one. It was patented in 1868. And
why don't you hand me that?
It's a rather complicated device. I'm not just sure how it worked, but it did work. I know that it ran on the beam in the top of the barn, and you can see here perhaps where they soaped this part of the device to make it move more readily across the top of the barn. William manufactured these on the farm for a year or two. He worked in his in-laws' barn, which was up the hill from Loudendale, the Pattison barn, and then he moved into Fairfield, where he tried to manufacture and expand his business. He was not successful at that, and experienced financial difficulties in the 1870s. He ended up back on the farm, making these one by one, taking them by horseback around the county and selling them to anybody that would buy them, and he would install them. He often referred to this as his cobweb period, because he was climbing around in haymows putting these things in to demonstrate to people that they would work. As a matter of fact, oftentimes he put them in on a trial basis and didn't collect for them until the farmer was satisfied that they would work. From this beginning, he developed the Louden Machinery Company. Now, at a later date, he realized that it would be much better if he used wheels instead of tried to slide these on the beam in the top of the barn.
Was there any particular kind of wood they used for that beam?
If there was, I don't know, but there was a great deal of timber out on the old Louden farm. As a matter of fact, that's what attracted Andrew Louden to it. There were several hundred acres of timber along Cedar Creek, and that was basically oak and hickory. And they cut their own wood, also walnut. They cut their own wood to build their buildings out there, and I would presume that the wood he used originally, at any rate, came from that source. I don't know that, as a matter of fact, but I would suspect that's the case. Now, the business did begin to pick up after he got through with his cobweb region development. Probably in the late 70s, he began to show some signs of life, and that's when he began getting additional patents. I have here an example of one of the early ones that had wheels on it. Perhaps we can take a look at that, if you'll just excuse me a moment. I'm not sure of the date. This is another of his hay carriers, but you'll see it has wheels that are designed to run on a beam. I do know that another example is here on my wall, and perhaps at a later time we can get a picture of it. But it's an 1884 patent, and it too ran on the beams. From these beginnings, then, William went on and developed much more complicated and much more efficient devices to carry the hay fork. And along with it, of course, he developed the hay forks. And again, I have some examples of those, which perhaps we can take a look at in a little later and bring them down. I have several things on the wall that I think might be of interest to the viewers. Is there anything else that you'd like to hear about the hay carriers?
I wondered if we could get a close-up of some of the painting on the old wooden carrier, because this metal one here is the Louden Gray that is so well known.
Yes.
But I think it's interesting that some of the early stuff here was red and had a green and it looks like a yellow stripe on it.
Well, this appears to be the original paint. Mm-hmm. It isn't in the best shape.
Now, did you varnish this to help?
No, I have done nothing to this. This is the way it was given to me. And if you will notice, if you can, if you look carefully, mm-hmm. see the patent date on there, which is 1868.
Yeah, the top it looks like September 24th and December maybe 3rd, 67. And then the bottom one, November 17th, 68.
And that would be this particular device.
The old number one that we first saw on that catalog was patented September 24th, 67.
That was his first patent.
And am I right, is that the first overhead monorail patented in the world?
Well, I presume if you could call that a monorail, yes.
All right.
It would have been, I'm sure, but
A crude
we
precursor,
never.
yeah.
I never thought of it as monorail because
Okay, sure. Because you think of that with the
had a
wheels.
little different concept.
Sure,
Of that.
okay. If you turn that over, there's a part on the back where the paint is very clear. Yeah, down there. That really gives you an idea of what it must have looked like.
Yeah, it's
Right there by your
it's in
hand.
pretty good shape for
Well, the wood is in excellent condition.
for the. Well, we grew good wood out on Louden
There you go.
Farm.
Now, I talked to somebody who had thought the track in a barn that he was familiar with was a maple that was, like you said, it was oiled
I
to make
would
it slick.
I would presume there was no specification
Okay.
as to the type of wood. Whatever wood was available was what they used. It had to be something that would be fairly hard.
Sure.
But other than that, I don't think there was any concern with regard to the type
Okay.
of wood.
I thought maybe a particular wood worked better for that function than another.
It may have, but if so, I don't know about
Okay.
it, Mark.
Great. Well, I think we've seen enough of this. Let's go on to some other stuff.
Okay.
All right.
Now,
Well, let's see. Where should we start?
well, I would suggest that the next logical procedure would be I presume the whiffle trees and the hay fork go with that.
Okay. Now, the whiffle tree, what is
Well,
that?
that's a single tree.
Okay.
So let me get those down and then we'll go from there.
Now, this is a harpoon style hay fork,
This is a harpoon.
and there up beside it is a salesman's model.
This is the only one. I've got one of the big ones, but I'm not even going to try to bring it up.
That's
It'd fill this
that's
room.
all right.
Let me get this out.
All right. Now the this harpoon here, it says September. Patented September. Is that 86?
So,
September 7th, 1880 something.
86.
Okay,
No.
86. And the
I don't know whether I can get
the
that
whiffle
down.
tree is October 1895.
Well, there was an earlier patent on that, but I don't know when it was. But at any rate, I think this would be the balance of the hay tool stuff that
Sure.
I've got.
Sure.
When we're through with this, then I'd suggest that we go briefly into the salt cup and
Okay.
the water bowl, which are part of the stall stanchion
Sure,
thing. I don't
sure.
have a stall or a stanchion, but that's part of that. And then move into the ventilating equipment,
Sounds good.
and then the miscellaneous, maybe some of the shivs
Okay.
and the ice tongs.
All right. Sounds
Okay.
good. Now this is attached to a miniature of one of the carriers. Am I right?
Yeah, this is a miniature of one of the carriers, and I don't know what one it is, but just let me play with that. I used to know how to work it. I haven't had it down forever. Well, I'm not going to try to work it. Are we?
Now, would that carrier have gone on the track or on the?
No, this is a salesman's sample, and this was carried by the several salesmen that went around the country selling. Now, this is a later date. This would have been after 1900,
Okay.
probably, that they were supplied with these samples. But as you see, this is a sample or a model of the harpoon type hay fork, which well, of course, this is the full-sized model, and was very popular because it's light and it would carry a pretty good load of hay. Nothing like the larger forks, but this one did an adequate job and was a very popular device. So the salesman would, rather than carry these around, carried this, and with it there was a model here of the carrier, of a carrier. Now remember, by the time that this came out, he had probably a half a dozen at least types of carriers to serve different needs for different farmers. And so this was just one of the models, but it's the one that the sales representatives carried with them.
And of course there would have been a hay rope.
Oh yes.
Twined through that so they could raise and lower the harpoon.
Yes, of course. This you see, this is fixed up in here, but actually, I'm not sure you can see, but there's a pulley in here and pulleys here, and this would be down below, so this would drop down.
And that's the purpose of the swivel tree, was that would be connected
Then
to the
the
rope.
whiffle tree, or the single tree, would go. This is a pulling single tree, they called it, as I think. You see it has a swivel on it. It fit on the horse, and the hay rope was tied here. The horse would then pull the hay rope as needed. And this device, there must have been millions of them made, because they turn up quite often in sales. We see them even today, rather common, but it's fun to have them. And this one has a patent date on it of 1895. I'm sure that there were some that were earlier than this, a little bit different in some of these devices that had another patent on them, because he did repatent things as he changed them and developed them. And so that's another one of the hay tool, or parts of the hay tool equipment business that he developed. I think now we should move probably to some of the other equipment that served something other than the hay tools.
All right, sounds good.
All right. These are a few items that we have mounted on our family room wall. The first item on the left is just one of the many pulleys that were manufactured by the Louden Machinery Company, and William developed a number of those for a number of different uses, and there's still quite a few around, but this is one of the early patents. Up above is one of the early carriers that ran on the wood track, but it did have the skate wheels, and I think that's probably the first one that had wheels on it. It's about 1882 or 3, as I recall. More fittings, and
those are coupling devices for like the cow stalls and so forth.
That's right. And then of course another pulley and another of the single trees.
Now that pulley has the allowance for the knot to pass through. Some of them don't have that.
Well, that's right. Well, he had, as I say, a number of different pulleys for a number of different uses, and he patented all of them, and they were all useful for different applications. He sold quite a number of those through the years. They used to make great wheels for cars when I was a kid. And that's simply part of one of the shipping boxes that was used by the Louden Machinery Company. And down below here is a full box that my wife has utilized for display of some of her flowers.
Yeah. The first one says hay tools, ice tools, barn door hangers, etc., Fairfield, Iowa.
That's right. Different times, different years, they had different descriptions on them, and also for different tools they had different, or for different items they had different logos.
Yeah, nice box.
Now here is a sign that depicts the old trademark, I guess it was, or the logo that was used on most of the catalogs and publications of the Louden Machinery Company in the, from the early 1900s until, well, really until the demise of the barn line, which was about 1956 or 57.
Now, who painted this sign for you?
This was done by a relative of mine out in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he made that sign for me, and I thought it was quite appropriate in the circumstances.
It's great. Yeah, because you see that a lot of times on the back of the catalog.
It's on the back of the catalog. It's on the back of, well, it's shown on the back of various catalogs in different forms. If I can find the one I'm looking for.
There we go. That's the one.
This is the one from which that was copied. And that is the old, or that is one of the barn plan books.
And what was the name of the...
Here she is again on the back of a catalog. That's the 1919 catalog. And so I thought it was quite appropriate that we have a sign made that
it's perfect.
That sort of tied all of these things together.
Now, what did you say was the name of one of the graphic designers or artists that they had on staff?
Well, I can't remember his first name, but they called him Swede Lundberg.
Okay.
And he was just one of several that worked out there. In the advertising department, he did a lot of work on photographs and catalog work, illustrations, and so on. He was excellent.
Okay, great.
Now, in the stalls and stanchions, and of course I don't have one of those because it would fill the room if we had it, and much as I'd like to, I don't dare. But one of the big items, of course, was the fact that they had a water bowl, and this one, I apologize, needs to be refinished, and I haven't done it. But old Bossy could get her water by pushing this down. It would turn the water on and fill the bowl. And so it was an automatic watering system. This was attached to the stall, and when she was in the stall, she could get water whenever she wanted it. Now, at one point in time, he also had attached to the other side of the stall a salt cup, so that she could also have salt if she wanted it. Now, I don't know how long that lasted because it isn't shown in very many catalogs.
Now, one dispenser I've seen, it looks like almost like a toilet paper dispenser. The salt was on a cylinder, it went on a peg.
Well, they had that too, but this is one of the early ones because he got this, he mounted it on a strap. And if you'll notice, this has got the Louden name here. And when he mounted it, the Louden name disappeared because the strap covered it. So you'll see he remedied the situation by putting Louden here. This was done. This was one of the few items that was a replaceable item. Most of the things that William Louden invented were built to last forever. And consequently, there weren't a whole lot of replacement parts. Kind of interesting, but it was the way things were done in those days, and he believed in building them stout. And most of the equipment was just that.
Did you show the camera the Louden name on your water bowl here?
Well, it's a little hard to see on this because, as I say, it needs to be cleaned up.
It's on the front, on the outside here. There we go. I think the light's hitting
right
nice.
There. It's cast in.
And there are remnants of the original Louden gray paint on that, so that's a plus.
Yes, but it needs some help.
Oh well. Now, I do know, I have a catalog from the 30s that has that illustrated. How far back do those go?
It goes back much beyond that. I'm not sure just when it was patented, but it was patented in the early 1900s.
Really?
It was one of the patents that helped make him really grow. And that growth took place, his big growth took place the Louden Machinery Company's big growth took place in the started in the early 1900s. 1900s to 1920 was a real growth period for the company. Now, at that point in time, of course, he had a lot of help because R.B. Louden, his youngest brother, there were 6 brothers. William was the oldest, R.B. the youngest, and R.B. came back and went to work with William, and they got C.J. Fulton interested in the late 1890s. And C.J. Fulton was a good financial man, and between the 3 of them, William the inventor, R.B. the businessman, and C.J. Fulton the financial man, they made the Louden Machinery Company go. Until those other 2 came with him, William's future was a bit shaky. But he certainly was an inventor, and he certainly had a lot of foresight as to equipment that would work on the farm, would help the farmer, and would be labor saving. And of course later that extended to the industrial world when he developed the industrial monorail equipment.
Now, I know one thing that's repeated over and over in the catalogs with this water bowl is its hygienic properties, that it created a clean water system for the cattle.
Well, of course it did, because that water was constantly being replaced. Mm-hmm. Now, it wasn't, you wouldn't want to drink it. You wouldn't have wanted to drink it, but, and the good farmers would empty that bowl periodically and clean it.
Now, could it be swiveled easily?
I'm not just sure how they did that. I think it had to be detached, and it was rather a job to detach it in order to get it clear off. But they would swab it out.
Okay, I see. Now, I've seen one water bowl with a little copper float in it. Was that allowed in?
Yes, he had. They had a device that did use a float, and was a bit different than this in the way. But the cow again got her own water.
Right. She depressed the float whenever she drank.
She depressed the float, and then there was a reservoir of water there and that was where they didn't have access to a well or to any kind of running water that could be brought into the system.
Sure.
So that's about all I have on the stall and stanchion. However, when it came to barn equipment, William, of course, along with his development of the equipment, he believed that every farmer should have a barn that provided a healthy place for his animals to live. And one of the things that disturbed William the most was the lack of ventilation in most barns. So he was a complete and absolute nut on ventilation equipment. I don't have any real examples of that ventilation equipment, other than all of us know about the cupola, which is a form of ventilating equipment, and I'll show you here a salesman's sample of the Louden cupola, which was much bigger, of course, and probably wouldn't have fit in this room. Now, this is a pretty complete unit. You can see in the inside, perhaps, and perhaps not, but get some idea of the construction of the thing. Now, you noticed, I'm sure, the size of this weather vane on this salesman's sample. Now let me just get to show you by comparison and give you an idea of the size of the real thing. This is the weather vane that went on the top of the full unit, the full-size unit. So it is a rather large device, and I know most people that will view this program know what a cupola looks like, because there still are a number of them around the countryside.
Now, did the company manufacture those weather vanes locally, or did they subcontract those?
Well, almost everything was manufactured locally, Mark, although I think they had a horse, and they had a cow, and they had a hog, and they had a rooster, and I suspect those were made elsewhere. I don't know. Also, I have here another salesman sample, and it's quite interesting how they developed their salesman samples. This is a beautiful case, and it has a very attractive label on it, and I'd be delighted if somebody would tell me what it was. But it apparently comes from the early 1900s, or perhaps about 1910 or 1915, along in there. But it's some kind of a ventilating equipment. This was on a knife edge, and I don't know just how it works, and I couldn't find it in any of the catalogs. So it must not have been a very successful item as far as production was concerned.
Now, would all of these samples have had carrying cases like this, do you think? Or?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think this was an exception. But of course, I don't know what all salesman samples there were, because
Sure.
I just happened to be lucky enough to get these several that I've managed to locate. People have been good enough to give them to
Sure.
me. They knew I was looking for them or selling them to me. And so he did, however, have, I'm sure, other samples, but he obviously had a lot of other ventilating equipment and so on, but I don't have samples, and I don't have pictures, and I don't have any of those devices.
Well, I know they're in town here. There's a ventilator on the roof of the William Louden home at 5th and Washington, and there's one on the roof of the Elks building.
Yes.
Wasn't he the first exalted ruler of the Elks?
He was the first exalted ruler, yes.
And then the Methodist Church has one.
Yes.
So they're around.
Well, the Methodist Church was designed by a Louden,
Guy Carpenter.
a Louden architect, and but it wasn't unusual for homes to have them in the early days, because it did, after all, let the warm air out, and it did help. Now, he also got into other things that people don't know about. A lot of people don't know about them. But if you look carefully, you can see the Louden name on these ice tongs.
Yeah. Would you demonstrate how those work? You have to squeeze the.
Well,
There you go.
and it was many of the farmers made their own ice from their ponds, and they cut their own ice in the winter and stored it.
Now, is this one of the ice ponds out behind your house?
Well, not one of the Louden ponds. That's the old Pumphrey pond, and that was the pond that was the ice pond for Fairfield from about 1890 or 1889 until the waterworks ponds became the ice ponds.
Okay.
But again, I don't know the vintage of this one, because I can't find it in catalogs.
And that has been repainted for you?
That has been repainted. And it was undoubtedly the Louden gray, because everything was Louden gray.
Why do you think they established Louden gray, or gray as the color?
I have no idea, but they did, and that was the color they used,
Yeah.
and that was the only color that they had in the paint shop. The old paint shop was alongside the old plant, and it was to the east of what's now the Broadway building.
Okay.
It's long since been torn down, but it was a 2 or 3 story structure.
Was that old frame building?
It was an old frame building.
Yeah, we've been given a photograph of that.
And it was strictly a paint shop, and it was a fire hazard from the word go. but everything was gray.
Yeah. But it never burned.
It never burned.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
It never burned, and that was fortunate.
Yeah,
Mark, that pretty well does it as far as the equipment that I have around here.
Well, boy, we really appreciate you sharing this with us. I think we've had, like we say, we've had several shows about the company, but we've never had this much of a close-up of the different products. So,
well, now this is strictly the barn line. You understand that the monorail division was a Johnny-come-lately. It came in 1917, 18, 19, along in that time frame, and it really was rather dormant until, not dormant, but it didn't take off until World War II. That gave it the impetus that made it then the predominant factor in the Louden Machinery Company.
Well, thank you again. I think this has been top-notch, and we've talked about doing this for 2 years, so I'm glad we finally got around it.
Well, I'm delighted to do it, and I hope that it'll bring back memories for some people, and it'll perhaps give some other people a bit of an insight into what was for many years one of the major employers in Fairfield.
And a company of national significance. That's one of the reasons of our research grant, is to establish that and eventually place some different Louden properties on the National Register of Historic Places.
Well, that would be wonderful, because you realize I'm 4th generation in this county. Our son Tom's 5th generation. Yeah. Somebody in the family's been here continuously since 1842, and this is home. We're proud of it, and we're proud of the contribution that the Louden Machinery Company and those early members of the Louden family made to Fairfield and Jefferson County, and to the state of Iowa.
Well, we're proud to have you a part of this county, so thank you again.
All right, you're very welcome.
I hope people enjoy watching our show.
Well, I hope they do too.